Good morning, dear friends. I will continue the subject of various forms of marriages. Though the word marriage is probably not fully appropriate, because when we talk about the period pre-stratification, several thousand years, obviously marriage as such didn't exist. There were, though, exist families, which we will call these days extended families, because the group of people living together, they have children, and the issue, or they knew who is the mother. Who is the father wasn't really important, though they knowingly or instinctively, as I mentioned before, trying to avoid incestual, too much the same genes, by it's assumed that the young man looking for another family was moving to the close family or extended family or a tribe. They obviously had friendly relationship, and it didn't go too far, but it went far enough, so the issue of incest wasn't important. And it was going on until came stratification, during which arrived the issue of large private property, as well as which produce various stratas of society, and the issue of, let's call it, domination via leadership, which was another. They often were combined, but not necessarily. What happened after this extended family period, which now we in modern times refer as group marriages, was what we will, in basically all cases, was polygamy, meaning one man, usually the one on the higher level, had several, let's call it, wives. That was typical, and it was going on, like we know in the even sacred Bible. King David, the hero of God, had 8 wives. And it was in all the majority of all countries. One of the wives often was the chief one. Another, again, was a stratification, but not necessary. That was how the woman was, in a sense, a property at that times. It was a property. It was not as lower class property as slaves, but not much better. Not much. Slaves, how they propagated and what kind of families have slaves, it's very little known. They were not of a great interest for the historians from that period when writing was, except there were slaves, period. Slaves were basically the people who were captured from the conquered territory, because at that time, I will be talking later, started wars, which had the purpose of the wars was to dominate. Usually the pastoral society attacked the agricultural, etc. Though even the in agricultural society, there of course existed a certain degree of stratification. How there were marriages, it's very difficult to say, because at the earliest period, pre writing is fuzzy, and there are conflicting records, like was it what kind of marriages were in ancient Indus Valley or Sumer. It's very difficult to say. Most likely in the lower level it could be simply monogamy, because there was no hierarchy. In upper was polygamy. Speaking about now, we will come to monogamy, which is the current situation, because as I said, polygamy is basically only in certain Islamic Muslim countries, not all. In some it is legally illegal, or in certain in Africa, etc. In most of the big part of the population, like China, Europe, America, India, monogamy is the legal format in which people live. Why it happened? It's quite interesting. It was probably a result of certain, to large extent, very strong impact had Christianity. And the other aspect was that the polygamy was shrinking amount of women was they were not so much available, because it was also polygamy came from the fact that during the war, usually the people who got killed were men, both during the battle, or when one country invaded another. They were basically killing men while using women as the wives, slaves, etc., to propagate further slaves or people. So there was not sufficient amount of men, and they, as the civilization grew and Christianity spread, under its influence, which Christianity did not, like Judaism at all, permitted polygamy, and modern Judaism does not as well, have to be added. And in China, basically polygamy was reserved for emperors, etc. It again became monogamous, and that is the system which. It's interesting to look at the history of life, and we will find out that among the mammals, monogamy is extremely rare. It's around, depending on various definition, around from 3 to 9, depend how they define or do the statistic. Only 3 to 9% of species live in the monogamous format, while there are various wild theories and no proof. But clearly, one thing is sure, that our direct predecessors from the point of view of evolution, that is hominids and big apes, and most of the old apes, they were polygamous. There was no monogamy. And it was for these reasons are pretty clear, because it is, the leading male who was the strongest was impregnating the females, and this way the strong genes were passed around. The only interesting exception of great apes are bonobos, which we will know they are. We will call they are probably, the whole tribe is one big family, because there is no leading males. Actually, the females are play more leading role, but it's an exception. All the rest of the primates involve the leading male in polygynous relation. Now, when we are coming to the period where our civilization is disintegrating in front of our eyes, if the humanity will survive, it's very unlikely that monogamy will survive as well. It's absurd, because in this period of difficulties, obviously the groups will have much better chances of survive, prosper, and develop than isolated nuclear families, which are even having less and less relation with what was replacement for the group family, with their so-called relatives, uncles, nephews or cousins, etc. And that does not really help necessarily. It helps often, they are so-called good children, which helps the aged parents, and of course parents are necessary to raise children. So I think that's I wanted to add, because I decided that yesterday's talk was too, I didn't present all the issue which involve family. So it will be all for today. Have a good day and goodbye.